This is Modern Gaming Culture. This series will attempt to highlight the phenomenon of PC, console, and mobile gaming and bring to light all of its phenomenal aspects. Let's take a dive together into the world of modern gaming and take apart its structure. Now, here's your host, Rotimi Osagi. Alright, this is Modern Gaming Culture. This is episode 34. Episode 1 of Team Profiles. Uh, Officially partnered with Modern Gaming Culture. So, sort of called an audible on TCG deck profiles. So the last episode I did was Volcanian. It was basically like a Volcanian kid revisited because I had already done a deck profiles for Volcanian, right? When it just came out, Journey Together, right? A rotation. So if you're interested in that, you can go check that out. And so, that was more of like, an advanced deck profiles class, if you will, right? And like my previous profiles were definitely like beginner class, right? So you definitely should not start there, right? You'll definitely find it very much not worth your time, right? You have to really listen to what I've been saying. You know how I say, show doesn't just represent me, just turn on my microphone and webcam and just say what's on my mind, and I prepared for months and ahead just for the show alone, right? And so it's something where you cannot just, show up, right, at the end of a class, right, and expect to, get everything all at once, right? And so, yeah, so kind of called an audible on deck profiles. I feel like that's actually pretty good place to start it because basically, how I would see a format is that, eventually we get to a point where that deck would just become so oppressive. It would basically become so oppressive you can't even really beat it, right? And so, if you really want to, really get in depth with that dynamic, you can check out my previous deck profile videos, and I've done quite a few series related to that too. So, yeah, that's definitely an advanced class for deck profiles, team profiles, etc. So, no sweat if you don't get it right. So, yeah, you can just check out my previous work related to that, right? So we're gonna start with team profiles now. So having a little technical difficulties related to the uh related to the visuals. So yeah, so might have a couple snags, but no big deal. We'll just power through it, right? So this episode is definitely gonna get a little heavy. I've definitely been trying to keep away from the heavy side. Um, I've been trying to really just, again, right, when it comes to the people I want to reach, understand these people bust their asses day in, day out, right? And they don't necessarily need a heavy hand on them, right? And they necessarily just need, a companion, right? But definitely this episode is gonna get a little heavy, right? So um when it comes to sort of understanding, the Pokemon community, right? The Pokemon community is definitely in a state of disarray right now. Wolf Glick, their savior, pretty much stepped away from the game. And, again, right, unless you're part of the Pokemon community, this means nothing to you, right? But when you really understand on a societal scale, right, you understand that, you can definitely sense that something is amiss, right? Even though you're not even part of the community, right? People who are just one meaning individuals will understand, something has changed, right? And that's because, Wolf Gluck pretty much isn't playing Pokemon anymore, right? And so it's something where, you know, um not just a big hole, right? But the thing is that, it's not something where, people necessarily, cashing all their chips just because Wolf Glick stopped playing Pokemon, right? Some did for sure, but for the most part, people are generally, naturally just doing what they do, right? And so it's something where you have to be very cognizant of that and recognize that, basically, right? When it comes to a lot of this stuff, right? Trust me, you can do it, you know? Um, and so it's something where, these are things people do. People compile, profiles, right? It's just that, they don't talk about it, right? And fuck you for remaining tight-lipped, right? And probably one of the most epic battles of good and evil in human history, right? And if you're, one of the people, or the part of the community, like again, congratulations, right? And so, round of applause for you getting this far, right? Um, but for the rest of us, right? Fuck you, right? For compiling a profile, right, and not talking about it, right? And so, you know, um, so it's not something where people are just like, oh, Wolf Glick's playing Pokemon, the whole world's gonna end, right? It's something where people are just like, oh, um, oh, well, I'm not familiar with this dynamic, so I'm gonna be able to bounce back, get back on my feet, right? The world's not gonna end. And so, um, it's something where, I recognize that essentially, Wolf Glick's feedback has basically been driving a lot of people's participation in the Pokemon community. And now that he's not going to be giving them that feedback anymore, right? People are going to feel lost and kind of without, right? When it comes to the Pokemon community. So, sort of as like a counter energy surge, I'm going to put together this team profile series. So, I have quite a few teams. And I'm just going to cover this team first. So again, this is like advanced, Pokemon team profiles, right? So I suggest, if you haven't already, to go back to, my previous work, right? And really dissect it, right? And look into it deeply, right? Um, so that, you're not feeling lost, right? And with this profile series, right? And I'll link them in the description below. And so um yeah, so we're gonna cover this team, right? So, it's the team I have in my battle teams here. So it is a Typhlosion, Hisuian Typhlosion, right? We got a Salamence, Rhyperior, uh, Toxapex, Necrozma, and Giratina. So it's a set I team, right? So you can have two restricteds, right? And so, um, and we're playing set J, so you can play Mythicals too, but Mythicals don't really have an impact on the game that much. So we have two restricteds, right? Necrozma and Drutina. And so what we're trying to do here is we're basically just trying to sort of weed out our opponent's board, right? And then have finishers, right? So you have really good leads. So we have Typhlosion. All the guys are pretty good leads, right? That's pretty much the kind of theme of this team. Is just you have really good leads. So your opponent can't necessarily just pick, their line that they're most comfortable with. They really have to think, right? And when your opponent's thinking, you're winning, right? So um, that's kind of how you want to approach this team, right? So generally, with a student Typhlosion, people are thinking about, formats like set E, I believe, or set H, where you can play, summons and stuff like that. You can't play any legendaries. And they're thinking about, all these like Typhlosion, Scarf Typhlosion with Torkoal on teams and stuff like that. And, there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to Typhlosion, right? Typhlosion has Frisk, right? It has the Eruption, right? It has the Fire Ghost type in too, right? And it's also Typhlosion. Typhlosion just a very good starter generally. And so it's something where, um, it doesn't have to be some cheese Typhlosion, eruption line, right? You can just play with the Frisk and you can just play stats, right? You can stat check, right? Typhoon is very effective with stat checking, especially with a focus sash, right? Nobody's really running stuff that's going to turn off items like Magic Room and stuff like that. And so you're going to get away with a lot with this Typhlosion, right? So you kind of just want to take advantage of a good type in and all that, right? Um, and so yeah, this whole team just full of good leads, right? And so you have set eyes, so stuff like Maridon, right? So you have Rhyperior, with Lightning Rod, right? And just be careful because Lightning Rod also absorbs your like electric attack as well, right? So yeah, this basically prevents people from just stopping your runs with like Maridon Whimsicott, right? Or just random Maridon, right? The issue is that when people start playing a lot of the Maridons, right, without really much thought either, um, they're really just trying to circumvent, participate in the game in the arena, right, with really cheesy lines, right? They want their cake and they want to eat it too, right? And so, um, something like a Rhyperior, right, especially when you're just getting back to playing VGC, is just a really good way of basically preventing your opponent from basically just, ruining your fun time, right? And then Toxapex has Baleful Bunker, right? So you can't just press slots, reckless moves into it. And then also has the Wide Guard, right? And then this Toxapex carries Merciless. So if you get lucky poisons, right? If your opponent is running Toxcorp for some reason with like Ursaluna, right? You can take advantage of that. And Merciless just helps with Toxapex very low stats. I think that's 52 base attack, right? So if you max its attack out, right? Um, right? And you know, can swing into some slots, right? You can get some really devastating board states, right? Where you have Toxapex healing off of a lot of, black sludge, stuff like that, right? And it's really just wreaking havoc, right? So yeah, play with the Merciless, right? Baleful Bunker, right? It just gives you a lot of good, mid to late game lines, right? And then you have the Necrozma, right? So this Necrozma has Cloverberry, right? So I've covered this a lot in my expose VGC series, sort of type matches and stuff like that. So if you want more extensive, breakdown, you can check that series out. And so yeah, you carry the Cloverberry, right? For moves like Sucker Punch, stuff like that, right? And then Necrozma just is a very hard Pokemon to take out, right? It has Psychic type in, right? So you have to do a Psychic or Dark moves, Ghost or Dark moves, right? And it has Prism Armor too. So those moves better hit hard, right? So you're not just gonna get some guy pressing, Astral Barrage and you're just gonna lose this thing, right? And then you have Dark Pulse, so you can answer too, and your Dark Terra, right? So it just keeps going. It's so strong, right? So yeah. So that's the Necrozma, right? And then we have the Giratina, right? So this is a Ghost Terra. This is a Ghost Terra Giratina, right? Levitate, right? That's just the ability it gets, right? And then it's got Gracious's Core, right? So that's 20% bonus on Ghost and Dark moves, right? And it has Shadow Sneak, Shadow Force, Dragon Claw, Roar, right? Roar can just be anything else, it doesn't really matter. But this just breaks stall board state, stuff like that, right? It's just a nice precaution to have, right? I feel like Roar is a very strong precaution, right? If you want to start something, right? And for example, we want to start Necrozma and Giratina, right? And they have like a Maridon, right? You can open Giratina and Necrozma and they can't just press Electro Drift into your Necrozma, right? And then you can just press Roar into the Maridon, right? And then they have to set back up, right? You have to understand they set up, right? Because these guys are trying to play without thinking, right? They want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. That's just not how anything works, right? And so you're going to see, kind of what we deal with and, participating in the game arena, what I call conducting internet oversight, right? So yeah, this team's pretty extensive. And so, I like this team, right? And that's just sets that you can just customize that as you wish, right? And if you really want to get deeper into this, you can check out my previous VGC series, right? So yeah, um, leads, right? It's fun. So I'm gonna close it there for the former part of this episode. I'm just gonna close it there. So it's been modern game culture, team profiles, modern game culture. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you.